Howdy, everyone. You're listening to Blue Jeans and Boots, where genetics grad students talk about how to navigate a PhD program while trying to stay sane. We also invite faculty from our interdisciplinary program here at Texas A&M onto the show and pick their brains about their research, what it's like being a principal investigator, and their journey to becoming a professor here at A&M. In this episode, we'll be talking to some of the students who participated in SURGE, our Texas A&M Summer Undergraduate Research Program in Genetics and Genomics. My name is Sarah. I will be your host today. And so if we could start off, guys, it's really nice to meet you. Could we go in turn and have each of you introduce yourself, tell us which university you came from, and which lab you worked in while here at Texas A&M?
Hey, my name is Nuique. I come from Maryland. I go to Bowie State University, and I worked in Dr. Sun's lab in chemical engineering.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Dante Lopez. I come from the University of Texas at San Antonio, and my lab in this summer was Dr. Edelman lab.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Julia Hunter. I come from Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania, and this summer I worked in Dr. Wong's lab.
My name is Neryan Castrodad. I'm from the University of Puerto Rico in Aguadilla, and I worked at Dr. Geoffroy's lab.
All right, so you guys are from all over the place.
Yeah.
What would you say is your favorite thing about Bryan College Station?
I just like the attitude here. Like, everyone is so nice. I like the Southern way of life.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the people here are a lot nicer than they are over there on the coast.
Sometimes they can be, yeah.
Yeah.
Could one of you explain to our listeners what the SURGE program is?
So the SURGE program is an REU, which is a research experience for undergraduates. And so undergraduates of any age can apply, and you come here for the summer, and they provided us with like housing, and we get a stipend, and essentially you work in a lab under a principal investigator while you're also maintaining a relationship with your cohort as well as the PIs and like administrators that run the program. And so you just work in your lab all summer. So we were here for 10 weeks, which was a significant amount of time, but it still feels like it wasn't quite enough.
Yeah. Well, I can understand that. Sometimes research takes a while and you don't quite get to the point that you'd like to before you have to stop. What was it like for you guys to apply to the program? Like, what was your experience like there?
So the application process for me is that I got an email from my mentor back home, and he was like, hey, you should apply to this program. I think this would be really beneficial to you. So I actually applied last year. I know Dante did too. So I applied last year, and then I didn't get in. And they were like, oh, so maybe I got to change a couple things before I apply again. So I upped my resume, went to a couple of conferences, did some more research, and then I was able to join.
Yeah, I have a similar experience like Lance. I applied last year, and I got close to it, but not that close. I was a sophomore at that time, so now that I'm a junior, well, hopefully senior now, I had more experience, more at least research experience, and a little bit more conference under my belt, so I grew my CV, so I think that helped me a lot to get in this time. So like, don't get like sad if you don't get in on the first time. Like, there's always more opportunities and you can try again next year.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's good advice. What about you guys?
Well, for me, I have a friend back home who actually recommended the program to me because I'm very interested in pursuing a career in genetics or genomics, but I didn't really know much about it. And so my friend had gone to this program before, and she was like, hey, I think you might really like this program. You should apply, see if it works out for you. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's great. And so I applied. I worked really hard on my application because I really wanted to get in on the first try, and thankfully it did work out, and it's been an amazing 10-week experience so far.
That's good to hear.
Yes.
And good to hear that people who came before are still recommending us.
Yeah, the NSF So this is the first year that I believe Surge has been NSF funded, but the NSF has a website where you can go on and like filter through pretty much all of the REUs that they sponsor. And so that's how I ended up finding this one, which I didn't really think I would be coming to Texas, but I'm super thankful that this is the one that worked out because I've had a really, really good experience here.
Oh, that's good. You've definitely come here during one of the hottest summers. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that's been
That's
quite a
what I've heard.
change. Yeah, it is definitely, it's gearing up. So you guys are probably leaving before the brunt of it hits us, but we're glad you've enjoyed yourself. What is one cool thing that you think you've learned during this experience, research-wise or anything about yourself?
I think in the lab, like I didn't have a lot of wet lab experience because I have a computational background. So just learning how the lab works, like working with other people, because sometimes, the BSc cabinet is being used by some other people. So being able to communicate that with others, or if somebody uses a reagent that they weren't supposed to, be like, oh, wait, that's not what you're supposed to do. I think being in an environment where everybody wants to help each other was really beneficial.
Yeah. What about anybody else?
I learned a lot about cell work in the lab, which was very new for me since back home we don't really do that much in our college. And having the opportunity to witness everything they do in the lab, especially in the one I worked in, was very new for me. And I learned a lot from my mentor and from my PI as well. So that was like a very great experience.
Okay.
I think for me, I learned a lot about just like time management and living on my own. I feel like at like whenever I normally go to school, like we have a dining hall and like there's a lot of resources like super close and available, but here we were just put into the dorm with a community kitchen and told to figure it out, which was such a good experience because now I feel like all of us are pretty self-sufficient and we can all, it was also like interesting having to manage my time, like, okay, I know this is what I need to get done at lab today, like I need to get there earlier today, or I know I'm gonna have to stay late, like just thinking about all of those things and like building a schedule while also maintaining just like life things in general.
Oh yeah, maintaining life during research can be really, really difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm glad that we can also impart life experiences on
Yeah.
you, even if, it's sold as a research experience.
Yeah.
So that's good. You specifically?
For me, I think what I learned this summer was like a lab doesn't need to be just for research. You can also find friends and almost like your other family, the family that you have at work. At least for me, my experience in my lab, everyone was so eager to help, so easy to like get along with. And I know that's not the case for all the labs, and it was a really good experience to be able to be friends with with postdocs, with grad students, and even like have dinners with a PI, which is not normally what PIs do, but like getting that involvement outside of lab, that was really cool for me because I saw another side of research and what grad school can be for me.
No, that's good. I mean, yeah, you definitely, whatever lab you end up in, being around those people so often, you do develop a bond with them, and they also understand what you're going through. And I mean, we do all really want to help because we've been there. So nothing's really a new experience. You can find someone to help you with anything. But some of you had mentioned that you had done research prior to starting the Surge program. And if I remember correctly, having conducted research is a necessity for applying, or am I incorrect on that?
I don't think it's a necessity necessarily, but it definitely is helpful.
Okay.
I mean, I know a lot of REUs are willing to give like your first research experience, but even if you can talk about like research experience you've just had like in a course, like with a lab, something like that. Like the only genetics research I had done before this was associated with a course. So like I come from more of like a chemistry background, but I wanted to like switch into something new. And so having even just something that was like associated with a class that I took, I thought was helpful, but I don't think you necessarily need to have research to apply to an REU.
Okay, so you mentioned chemistry research. Could all of you tell us a little bit about the research you did before you came here, and whether the research you've done while you've been here is related or vastly different?
Yeah, I'll start. So before this, I did physical chemistry research, so like a lot of computational stuff, and I found that was not what I wanted to do. So after I mentioned I took that course, I thought like, oh, genetics research is really cool, like maybe that's something I'm more interested in. But I think something that was cool about this program is the genetics department is like interdisciplinary. So even though this RU is technically genetics, I feel like I did a lot more like neurobiology, which has been really, really interesting to me, and that has definitely opened my eyes into something I might want to do.
Yeah. I was doing research back home. It's mostly computational based. I was doing like protein ligand docking and molecular dynamic simulations, which is everything is done on the computer there. And I came over here, I was like, I think I need to have a good wet lab experience so I can see both sides of the coin, so I can at least have experience in the lab, in the wet lab, and also in the dry lab with just the simulation based stuff.
I had a similar experience because the research I'd done was mostly on annotating genes, so it was mostly computational work. But I really enjoyed doing it because I got to learn a lot about genetics and what annotating genes entailed. But I wanted to see if I can do something more, especially get some experience in wet lab scenarios. And so that's why I applied to this research program, and yeah.
For me, I think my experience was like the research experience that I had was almost everything on the like theoretical side, because my research experience that I had before this was on a educational science background, which is weird because my major is microbiology and immunology, but I was in a scholarship which allowed me to merge my research interest in science with educational science. So I think coming from that background and like analyzing systematic reviews, creating a literature review, like helped me understand how like research can be like two sides, and like you need both sides to be successful, right? Like you need to know how to use your resources. And then coming here and being in a wet lab and talking about what Julia said, like this program is interdisciplinary, and my research interests right now are like a little bit more on the epigenetic side, but the lab I was hosted by was entomology lab. So that was a little bit hard for me at the beginning because I was like, I don't like bugs, but at the end was like all the molecular biology techniques is used widely in almost every lab on wet labs. So I was like, okay, you're here to learn techniques, and I really learned techniques, and especially like the environment in my lab, I think I could have not picked a better lab for me to be in. So this is really interesting for me, seeing how interdisciplinary programs can foster really different sides of research on the same like spectrum.
Is there anything in particular that made you guys decide on the labs that you went with?
Well, for me at least, I think was the techniques they use, even though their like model organism is mosquitoes. My idea behind my thinking of what labs I wanted to choose, because search asks you for a list of five like maybe potential labs that you want to work with. The one that I put and got in was because the techniques they use, and like it's such a new like topic, like mosquito genetics, which is not that there's not that much research on. So I was like, okay, this is something new that I can learn, and something that it can be useful for me in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, so when we picked the five, it was like half and half computational and half wet lab. And I felt as though that if I went to another computational lab, like obviously it would make me better at doing all that work, but I still wouldn't have the background I think I would need to be beneficial for other labs. Like if that lab is mostly doing wet lab work, I wouldn't be a benefit to them, I think, which is why I chose the one. And the topic that they had, like the work that I did was mostly in plastic degradation, which I think is like really important.
Yeah.
It's like a general topic just for everyone. So that's like one of the big reasons why I picked it.
Okay.
I chose labs mostly based on the topics they were researching on. I was mostly interested on genetic engineering or something that would have to do with immunology. And so those were like my 5 picks. And I'm glad that I got the one that I did, because I actually got to work with genetic engineering in some level, which was very cool.
I want to do something like more health related and like more clinically focused. So the labs I picked were sort of about like disease. I ended up working with like Alzheimer's, which was, I thought, a good fit for me. So
Okay, that's fantastic. If you can narrow it down, what would you say is the best part about having gone through the program, but also the most challenging part?
I think the most challenging part, as Julia mentioned earlier, is like time management. Because sometimes you just don't know, especially in wet lab work, you do an experiment for 6 hours. You see the result, by that 6 hours, you're like, it doesn't work. So then you're gonna have to do it all again tomorrow. It's either you do it again tomorrow, or you keep pushing through that day, and then you have such a longer day. So I think the time management part, and also keeping your expectations, because obviously not all the experiments are going to work. Like the protein you're expressing might not express this time, because it just happens in biology. That's like the biggest thing that I've learned.
Yes, failure is a part of science, no
Yeah.
matter what we do, and that's how we get to success.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I thought the most challenging part was, I think the first 2 weeks, just like the transition period of getting here. Like, not only do you not really know anyone or like the area or like what to do or anything like that, but also like coming into the lab, like you don't know any of the background or any of the topics or any of the techniques. So for a minute there, you kind of feel like you're drowning and you don't think you're gonna get out, but then eventually it does turn and you make friends, you figure out where you are, and you figure out like what your purpose is in the lab. I think once you figure out like your project and your purpose in the lab, things get a lot easier.
Yeah, I completely agree with Julia. I found that to be the most challenging part too, as well as the part where you had to organize yourself in a way that you had everything you needed for the week, or that you were prepared to arrive at the lab at the time you had to, and all of that. But the best part of the experience, I think, was the connections we got to make and the friendships we formed. That was something that caught me off guard completely, because I wasn't expecting it to happen, but it was something that was really nice.
For me, I think the most challenging part of it was like not not getting too worry on my project and not into my head of like, okay, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Like ask questions, try to find the answers that you're looking for without drowning, because like science is basically almost 90% failure and 10% success, right? Like it's gonna get to you at one point, so like you can get into your head. So I think that was like the hardest part of the project, especially going to a lab that you barely know the topic. They do like certain things that it's very new, and you don't want to even like try to help somebody in their experiments and like messed it up, right? Because they've been working on those projects for maybe years or like months, and you don't know how can react to failure, right? So that, I think that could be like the one thing that I had more problems with. And I agree with Neryan on the second part. Like I think the best part of this, it was like I was not expecting to find these connections, and I got them. And it's like, okay, now I have friends like all around the country and in another parts of the world, right? So it's like, it's pretty cool, this program.
Yeah, I'll say A&M has a really diverse student body just in general, and so, that can be really helpful. It gives you a lot of diverse perspectives from all over the place, and I think that it helps you learn a lot about not only yourself, but just about how everyone else around you works. So what is everybody's plans for the future now that you're done with the search program?
Well, for me, because A&M has this called early graduate admission. So for the internships or like REUs that are on campus in summer, they have this availability of apply early to graduate programs, and you get the results before the normal applications open. So I apply for it because I'm becoming a senior, and mostly like after this experience I realized that I want to go into research and maybe a PhD. And like that was pretty awesome from A&M and the programs they have, like being able to apply with your like resources that you already apply for the internship. So like they utilize the same letters of reference, and you just only need to like fix your statement because you're applying to graduate school now, not an internship. and that was pretty cool. So I think for me, at least, a PhD is in my future.
Fantastic.
Yeah, similarly to Dante, I also applied to the early graduate program. I graduate this fall, so then by next year, but even before I'm going to start class, they're going to give me a decision on whether or not I get into the PhD program or not.
I'm hoping to do an MD rather than a PhD, so hopefully I'll be getting into that. I'm going to be taking a gap year though, so I'm a rising senior, so I'll graduate next May and then take a gap year and then hopefully be attending medical school after that.
Yeah, I'm also considering medical school as well. So now I have to start with the whole application process and preparing for the MCAT and all those steps. But yeah, I think an MD is what I'll be pursuing.
Fantastic. Do you think your plans have changed because of search, or do you think you're staying pretty much on the same line that you came here with?
I think they have. I think showing the research, being in a research lab at a big institution really opens your eyes into the different opportunities you can have. Because it's not like the only opportunity isn't just to be in a research lab. You can also go into industry in conjunction with that, or go into industry first and then research after, or vice versa.
Yeah, for me, I think it clarified my ideas because I knew that I wanted to be in research, but I didn't know how bad I wanted a PhD because it's a commitment. It's 5 or 6 years or even more of your life. And I didn't know if I wanted to spend that amount of time studying again another topic, but this experience made me realize like it's fun. I like it. I find it like fulfilling. So I think it just clarified my ideas a little bit more.
It was a little bit similar for me too, but in my case, I was really debating whether to pursue a PhD or an MD. And so this experience helped me see that even though I really enjoyed research and the experience was amazing, I think I'm leaning more towards an MD rather than a PhD. So it really helped me clarify as to what I wanted to pursue. And I'm really grateful that I was able to figure that out now rather than later. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I have a pretty similar answer to Neryan, that it definitely solidified that MD is more the path for me, but it also told me that research is also one of my passions, and if something doesn't work out with that, then I definitely think going the research route would not be one that I would be upset with at all. I would be super happy going into that as well. So it's nice to know that there's two sides of it.
Yeah, and I know some of you said that you already had conference experience and things like that, but we do a poster session of your research at the end of that. And how was that experience? Did you enjoy yourself?
Yeah, that was good. I think one of the biggest things that this program has taught me is about scientific communication. We had to do like a mid-summer presentation giving like our background and our progress, and then we had the poster session, and then we also had yesterday we had a flash talk, so we had 3 minutes and 1 slide to present our whole 10-week research. And so all of those came with different challenges and different demands, but the common denominator with them was that since it's an interdisciplinary program, we're all talking about something super different. So you have to figure out how to walk the line of no one knows what I'm talking about, but I also need to be able to explain this in a way where my science makes sense. So I think scientific communication was probably one of the biggest things that I've gained out of this program.
Coming from a podcast, we love that.
Yeah.
All about science communication.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I'd never done a poster before, so this poster session experience was pretty great because like I compared it to doing like oral presentations and such. And I find oral presentations to be a bit more serious than a poster because when you're presenting a poster, you have more of a one-on-one dynamic with your audience. And that was really great because you felt like you were getting your message through to them and they could ask more direct questions and you could build a connection with that person. And that was really fulfilling for me.
For me, I think Like this was my second poster presentation, but it was really different experience because my first poster was based on a systematic review, and this one was based on actual research. And like for me to explain to other people that maybe don't know anything about my research, explaining my methodology and how I achieve my results, it was really different from just saying like, oh yeah, I use these kinds of websites to like narrow it down. And this one I was actually explaining my methodology, the process that I use, and how I achieve my results. So that was pretty cool for an experience. But also like the flash talk that we had yesterday, it was really challenging for me because you need to find words that everyone can understand without getting into too much like scientific jargon, and you need to get your point across without confusing your audience when you're having like 10 different presenters on the same time. Like you need to find a line and stick to it, and maybe try to walk that line with every person at a different pace.
Yeah, in terms of the poster presentation, just knowing who you're talking to just gives a better background of how you're going to present your data on your poster. Because if somebody comes in and they don't have a biology background, like I met friends here from engineering and they all wanted to see my poster. So the way I presented my data there was a little differently than somebody who I know who has a biology background.
Yeah.
So I think understanding, just knowing your audience whenever you present is going to be really beneficial, because if you aren't able to explain to somebody who has no idea what your research is about, that kind of shows that maybe you don't really have a full understanding of what you're doing. So being able to do that to somebody who you just meet somebody off the street and then you tell them about your research, you should be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Now, outside of the poster presentation and the flash talk you're talking about, obviously you guys get to do research. What other opportunities did you have, or I guess commitments in the program while you were here on top of doing your research?
We had to take a class, Bioinformatics command line class.
Okay.
And it's a graduate level class, so it definitely was an experience for all of us.
Yep, I took that one.
So.
Yeah, for me, that class was at the beginning really challenging, but at the end, it proved to be worth it, because for my analysis, at least in my project, I use command line and I use several like scripts that I learned in class. So obviously, a grad student helped me analyze my results and everything, because I'm not that experienced on that, but if I wouldn't have taken that class, I wouldn't understood anything at all of how my results were like able to give me a conclusion. So I think that's pretty cool that you have to take this class, even though it's a graduate level class. It really helps you, because at this point, genetics and analyzing genetics information, it's gonna be on computers. There's no way a human can possibly analyze genomes at that level. Mm-hmm. So I think that was pretty cool of the search program.
Yeah, for me, the class was definitely challenging, and I not only got to experience a graduate level class, but I also got to take a class the way they teach over here, as opposed to Puerto Rico, where my classes are usually in Spanish, and the dynamics are usually a bit different. And I also never really taken a bioinformatics class, so that was completely new for me. So it was definitely challenging, but I made it through, and I think I did good on the class, so we're good.
Yeah, the class was tough at first, but I'm thankful that I took it here with 9 other people that were taking it with me, because that made it a lot easier to struggle with others who were struggling. So definitely being around other people that were going through the same thing made that class a lot easier. And like Dante said, like it is proving to be useful, and I'm very, very glad that I have those skills now, even if it took a little bit of work.
Can each of you give us a short explanation of the specific research you conducted while you were in your labs? I know you mentioned earlier a general idea, but just a brief synopsis.
Okay, I could maybe use my flash talk. So in my case, we were focusing in something related with gene therapy and genetic engineering. So we basically used astrocytes, and we inserted a gene using a vector. In our case, it was a virus. And then we would see whether or not that gene was inserted into the cell through a GFP imaging process. And so if the cells, when we subjected them to fluorescent light, if the cells would glow green, that means that the gene did indeed go into the cell. And if they didn't, well, it didn't work as efficiently. But in our case, what we tried to see was if specific drugs had an effect in this process. And so what we thought was that the drugs could actually improve the process by making the gene go into the cell more efficiently compared to cells that weren't exposed to any of the drugs. And we actually found that the drugs did have an effect, but we would have to further study them and see and compare the results to see whether or not the effects are meaningful or if they are going to alter in some way. So that was pretty much the gist of it.
Well, I think you explained that very well. So.
In my lab, we were looking at early Alzheimer's disease, so trying to slow down its progression and open up new treatment options. So we used a mouse model and did like behavioral and instrumental testing on them. So we ended up finding that in early Alzheimer's disease, the mice have instrumental reversal learning deficits, which means that a certain part of their brain called the striatum is impaired in the early stages of the disease. So then we used a genetic technique with fluorescence reporters to look at when the neurons were activated during their learning processes. And then we ended up finding that the Alzheimer's disease mice have more overlapping neurons in the different phases of their learning. And so we're looking into, unfortunately I won't be here to do this, but they're looking into treatment options to hopefully like lower some of the hyperactivity of neurons that are seen in early Alzheimer's disease and maybe slow down the progression of the disease. So.
All right. I mean, given the goal of med school, I think, that research was really good for you.
Yeah, so the title, I think, for my abstract was Saccharomyces cerevisiae for polyethylene terephthalate depolymerization, which essentially means that we're using yeast to depolymerize PET, and PET is a plastic. So what we did in the lab is that we have a yeast scaffold, and then we have two different enzymes, fast PTase and MHTase, and those break down PET. And we plop those two enzymes onto the scaffold, because without the scaffold, if the enzymes are just in solution, they basically just can't do what they need to do. So having it on the yeast scaffold expresses it more and has more end product, and they were able to successfully do that. They were able to fully depolymerize PET to their constituent monomers, and for further use, they want to be able to reuse that for reusability as well as upcycling, so using those products, again, either to make plastic or higher.
No, that's world impacting. That's good stuff.
For me, my project utilized CRISPR-Cas9 as a gene editing tool on a transgene construct on a mosquito called Aedes aegypti. So we basically induce a double-stranded break on a gene that we knew how it behaves because it's a transgene construct. So we introduce that gene into the mosquito. It's not present in the wild type. So we look at the microhomology-mediated DNA repair pathway to see how certain breaks at a certain on how microhomology surrounding that cut site can affect the size of the deletion base pairs. So we saw that when we got it at a certain cut site, we got a lot of 6 base pair deletions, and depending on that cut site, we can adjust the deletion sizes. So the sizes we saw was 6 base pair deletion, 10, 8, and 12, depending on the cut site. So what this means is that we can introduce specific breaks surrounding microhomology to delete the base pairs that we want, so that can help us to vector control in specific genes that can produce like the vectors that obviously mosquito are, like harboring those viruses or parasites. So that was my project basically.
Okay, sounds like you guys kept yourself really busy through the 10 weeks. Glad you enjoyed yourself, though. Okay, so we're going to end this up by asking, number one, given the chance to go back and do it all over again now that you've experienced, would you still apply? And what is any advice that you would give to future students who are hoping to participate in Surge one day?
I would say I would absolutely apply again. And for other students, I think don't get discouraged if you don't get into your first try. That happened to me. I didn't get on my first try, but now in my second try, I think it was the best time for me to get in, because I realized, like, if I was accepted last year, I didn't have the experience or the wherewithal to like be able to survive this. Basically, taking a grad school like class, I would have not been able to. I was a sophomore, like I wouldn't be able to. But now, like, don't get discouraged. Opportunities are always gonna be available to you, and always apply to everything. So, like, for me at least, the first one to say no to you is basically yourself. So if someone is not saying no to you, why would you say no to yourself? You know, so apply. That's my best advice.
Yeah, I definitely would do it again if I could go back. And for like an advice I could give for everybody who wants to go into it, definitely just apply. Even if you think you don't have the good resume, like, don't make that decision for yourself. Somebody else is going to look at it and be like, okay, this person has a lot of potential. Because I know for me personally, in science, there's a lot of imposter syndrome, to be like, oh, maybe I'm not that good to be able to do this type of research. But if you're able to get out of your own head and kind of just put yourself in that position, because as soon as you get into that position, you get to realize that, yeah, I will be able to do it. And then you'll be able to grow and move forward from that.
I can absolutely say imposter syndrome doesn't stop when you get in graduate school. And if you'll talk to most of the professors around here, they'll say it doesn't even stop after that. So I appreciate it.
Yes, I would 1,000% do this again. If I could wake up tomorrow on our first day, I would absolutely do that. I'm so sad we're all leaving. But I think my biggest piece of advice is anywhere you go, any REU you do, just make as many connections as you possibly can, whether that's with the people in your cohort. I think we're all pretty connected now, but also with just people in your lab, postdocs, PIs, anyone you see in the hallway. Just try to go to talks, get to know people, and make connections, because you never know when those connections are going to prove useful to you. Like, getting to know people and just understanding what they're doing and how that can relate to you, you'll never know how that will benefit you and how you can then benefit them in the future.
I would go through this experience again, like, no hesitation. And I would advise that when you're in your application process, I know it is a bit scary and challenging, but you shouldn't feel afraid to reach out for help, especially to other fellow students that have already completed REUs before and have gone through the process, because they can definitely help out, like, with your personal statement or pointing out things that you could change or alter in order to make your application stand out, because they already went through it. They know what other people are looking for, and they're definitely going to help you out. And you'd be surprised at the amount of students that are willing to help, even though you would think that most people don't really want to help you. There are actually a lot of people out there who won't even hesitate to lend a hand and, like, help you out. So definitely reach out.
Oh, yeah, I found that whoever you talk to, they're mainly just excited that you want to talk to them.
Yes.
And so that's the big thing
Yes.
there. But, well, thank you all for your rave reviews and for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we are very sad to see you go. But today's episode was hosted by Sarah Ingram and produced by Isabella Childers. This podcast is brought to you by the Texas A&M University Interdisciplinary Graduate Program in Genetics and Genomics. If you have any questions about our program here at A&M, please feel free to email us at bluejeansandboots@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Genetics Podcast. Thank you for listening, and we hope you'll tune in next time.